if you're thinking about writing something, just start. That way, at least you're like a couple of steps up the mountain and not staring up at it from the very bottom. There's a lot of times, if it's something new and scary and weird, just start.
Some experts chase attention, but the smart ones build authority. You're listening to the Authority on Demand podcast, where credibility becomes your competitive advantage. Every week, we're pulling back the curtain on how founders and leaders turn expertise into inbound demand through books that position, media that converse, and strategies that actually move the needle. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, your host and Chief Creative Officer at Authority on Demand. Now, let's turn your authority into leverage. So, everybody, what do you get when you combine a physics degree, a comedy background, and an unquenchable thirst for adventure? You get today's guest, whose journey from computer programmer to published author took him 4,000 miles through Mexico, Central America. And on today's episode, we're going to be revealing how ordinary people transform extraordinary experiences into the books that define them. We're going to be exploring not just the journey from LA to Panama, but the internal transformation of someone who never felt like he had something substantial to write about, to an author whose debut memoir has captivated readers with its perfect blend of humor, history, and heart-stopping adventure. Without further ado, please welcome Matt Savino. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. That was a great intro.
Hey, real quick before we jump back in, if you're loving what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button and drop us a like. We're bringing you the best authors, the most real conversations, and all the writing wisdom that you didn't know you needed. So, stick around because it only gets better from here. All right, now let's get back to the conversation. I always like to, give a little flair to things.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. So yeah, I mean, you have a very unique book, a very cool story too. I was looking through it all, and I mean, just the simple concept of traveling around, going from LA to Panama, that's awesome too. But the way you delivered it, I think, is really noteworthy, and I think our audience is going to learn a lot about your experiences, both through the journey and also the writing process. So, yeah, appreciate you coming on.
Sure.
Yeah, well, let's dive in a little bit about your life before we begin writing the book. Tell us a little bit about what the exact moment was that you decided to go on this 7-month journey. Was there a specific catalyst or something that built up over time?
Yeah, there was definitely a specific catalyst. I was on these, I've been going on these photo trips for a while. I'm a pretty avid landscape photographer. And there's this guide, Mark Adamus, that I like to go on these trips because we always get into these crazy adventures. Because if he just sees something that he thinks is going to be a good picture, we're off and running, And so we were down in Patagonia and he was arranging a trip for the next year to go on a boat through these fjords in southern Chile where hardly anybody really goes. Like the government, you have to get special permission, and it would have been a chance to get some really cool pictures. And it's probably the closest in my life I ever felt like going on some kind of expedition, somewhere. But the problem was, I knew because we are already down there. When you go to Patagonia, you're kind of going back and forth between Argentina and Chile, and
Mm.
the only rental cars you could get that would let you do that are these horrible little like Geo Metro cars that they have these tiny little tires. We popped two tires. We saw another one of those cars that rolled, and the poor girl was still hiking around with a black eye, like, and
Oh,
a bandaged nose. And so I knew I wanted to do this trip the next year where we get to go on the boat, but there would also be a lot of driving in that too. And I just Googled, can you drive to South America? Because I started thinking about having my own Toyota FJ Cruiser with a nice big wide wheelbase and much more comfortable to drive than these horrible cars down there. And it's like, yeah, it turns out you can. It's the Pan American Highway. A lot of people do it. There is a jungle called the Darien Gap between Panama and Colombia where you have to ship your car around there. And it used to be there was a ferry and it was pretty easy. You could just drive on the ferry, but now you have to like find a shipping container and usually you try to find another car. So to split the cost and you get two cars into a shipping container. And it's a big pain in the butt, but you can do it. And so that was the genesis. Basically, I started looking into it. I got excited about it. Started reading all these blogs, and I was going to see if maybe I could get a leave of absence from work, which they had the policy to do that. I was working for AT&T, which bought out DirecTV, but then they offered this layoff to all the former employees of DirecTV, and it was coincided with almost the exact time I wanted to leave anyway. So I said, all right, well, that's a sign from the universe. I guess I should just take this layoff and take the severance and go. And that's how it all started.
Wow. Okay. Well, it's interesting because you kind of had the inspiration built up before that, and then the job switch happened, and boom, there you go. It's time to give it a try. So really cool, and thank you for the background history about that too. I mean, I've been to Chile. I actually went there this past summer, but not where you were by any means. But we were in
Okay.
Santiago, nice and cozy. So it's cool to know. I mean, it's a huge country, but it's interesting to see the differences between different areas in one spot. So really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, let's dive into the book a little bit. I think it's really cool that you insert quizzes and that sort of thing throughout the book too. Why exactly did you choose to do that and to blend entertainment with education in this way?
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny you asked that because I'd sort of forgotten this how all this came about. But I originally had some stuff about Mesoamerica that I thought was really interesting, like the fact that chili peppers, nothing hot existed in the old world before the Columbus came and they discovered chili peppers. So,
Mhm.
Thai food was not spicy, Indian food was not spicy, which is hard to even imagine before, the 1500s. And so I had a collection of interesting facts like that in this section called About the Book. And then I talk about how we think of the reason for the title of the book is because if you ask somebody what continent Costa Rica is in, you get a lot of answers, including Central America, South America. Technically, from our point of view, it's in North America, but from their point of view, it's in a continent called the Americas. And I'd never realized that. So I thought that was really interesting too. And that was in a section called About the Title. So it explained the title of the book.
People from Chile say that all the time and explain that to us, and it's funny because we just don't
Yeah.
think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, to them, a North American is always somebody from the United States or Canada,
Hmm.
never somebody from Mexico or Costa Rica. And so I originally had those in, and then I had the kind of the long version of the story I just told you about how the trip started in the first chapter. And I went to this writing workshop with this guy, Rolf Potts, who's a travel writer, he's really great. And I was telling him about that and that I really liked what I had in the about the book and about the title. And he just looked at me in horror, like, why would you put good stuff in these prelude sections that nobody ever reads half the time? And I was like, all right. And how am I going to combine all this stuff? And it was one of those just in the shower, like, okay, there was no segue in between chili peppers and the story of the cars and all that. And I said, all right, I'll just make it into a pop quiz, and then I can bounce back and forth between questions. And yeah, but before that, I was like, how on earth am I going to combine all this stuff into one chapter? And the form of a quiz came up, but I wanted to word it really carefully so it didn't sound like I was kind of putting the reader on the spot or making them feel dumb. So I was saying like, look, I wouldn't have got these answers right either before the trip. So, but here's what I would have said playing along. And yeah, hopefully it ended up being a good, engaging way to start the book. And yeah, I'm hoping that people would pick it up and read the first few chapters or the first few pages even and get a pretty quick idea. Okay, what's the content of this book? What's the tone? Who's the author? What's he all about? And it kind of ended up working out that way with the pop quiz idea that brought it all together.
All right. Well, I like that, and it's always interesting to see different, unique book elements that may not be in other books. There's always ways to spice up
Yeah.
a book. It could have just been a memoir or informational text, but you added in humor and the quizzes, and it's really cool to see that you did that. I think all the audience listening today could learn from that, learn from your book. Just think your manuscript's done, but what else can be added? What other elements can spice it up? That's how you make
Hmm.
it unique. So really cool.
Yeah.
Being that is you do weave a lot of humor into that, I'm wondering if you'd like to speak about that a little. I'm assuming it comes from your natural, instincts of, comedy, but did you have any certain plan and outline to make it humorous too, or was?
Yeah. So Bill Bryson books are kind of my template for this. And if you haven't read Bill Bryson, I would suggest Walk in the Woods is like his most accessible intro book, at which they made a movie about with Robert Redford and Nick Nolte. It wasn't all that good, but in the book, he's really funny. He's telling this compelling story. I mean, I'm laughing out loud a lot. But then also he'll go into these deep dives, like he goes on this 2-page tangent about the American chestnut tree that was in the eastern part of the U.S. there's this incredible tree that was like as big around as a sequoia, and but blight came over with the Europeans, and now they're basically all gone. They're trying to bring it back, but they're struggling. And that was my big eye-opening moment. Like, you can do that. You can be funny and kind of do a sort of documentary level deep dive. I didn't think that was allowed. I thought it had to be sort of one or the other. But for me, yeah, a book was always going to be have humor right up there as one of the main things, because that's just the way I think.
Right.
And yeah, doing stand-up comedy, which was kind of like a kind of writing, and it was a good kind of writing in that you get instant feedback. So you learn pretty quick that what you might think is hilarious isn't necessarily hilarious to everybody else, and some throwaway line you don't even think is funny, everybody laughs at. So that's why also in the book I tried to have some beta readers, and I had a writing coach, and so I could at least get a sample size of a few people. Like, do you think this is as funny as I think it is? Because I like this part, and then but then they would really love some part that I didn't even think I was trying to be funny in. So
Right.
um but yeah, there's another writer called Tim Cahill that I really like a lot, and his stuff is always it's kind of there's always going to be humor, like you're unless it's just obviously like a really tragic subject, which I have a chapter on that in the book, and I don't do a lot of humor in that one, but for the most part, yeah, and try to keep it funny.
Yeah, understood. And thank you for kind of walking us through some of your inspirations. It's something that a lot of writers need to learn to do is to read, right? And that's how you kind of got your inspiration and your writing style. And there you go. It's all because you've read and you're inspired by them. I like the instant feedback idea too. It's so important to have a second set of eyes on your work, even if it's just, does this joke land well or not? It might sound good in your head, but maybe not to your audience. So great strategy there.
Yeah.
Was there an example of maybe like something you thought was funny and then you had to like remove from the manuscript?
um
Challenging
uh,
question. It might have been a while.
yeah, yeah, I had a whole section on, so I ate these crickets in Oaxaca,
Mhm.
and they're called chapulines, and it's kind of, and my whole question was, is this a delicacy, or is it one of these things kind of like fruitcake in the US where people used to really like it because it was traditional, but now the kids don't want to have anything to do with it. And I tell that story, but I also compared it to at work. So I work with a lot of people from South India, and they would have these potlucks that were just incredible. But they would have bring in these India sweets that I didn't think were very good, and they seemed to sit around all day. Like, if you brought in donuts, they were gone by 10 o'clock. But if you brought in the India sweets, they're either way too sweet or they don't have any flavor. They're just kind of weird. And so I thought that was pretty funny and had it in there. And my writing coach didn't like it. And after a while, I was like, yeah, because it is still could be a little bit like I told a guy I worked with who I'm good friends with, like, I love Indian food, but I don't get the India sweets. And he just looked at me like I ran over his dog. So I was like, okay, maybe I should, maybe that's still a really like cherished, sensitive item, And so that's one example I can think of something that just wasn't working. Another one was I traveled with a coworker, and we got into a lot of arguments. So I turned those into fodder for trying to be funny in the book. But I wanted to try to make us look like we were both being petty, like, the movie Romancing the Stone, where they're like in the jungle and the fighting all the Kathleen Turner and Michael Douglas are fighting all the time. So I was going for that. I wasn't trying to make her look worse than me. So there were some things I took out because they just, they weren't as light enough to be funny. So that would be another one where I trimmed a lot of stuff back.
Understood. Well, that's really cool. Very interesting. First off, I love the stories in general, but I can see how, right place in the right time. Perhaps the sweet joke would have landed better with a different audience, but for a book, you never know who's going to pick it up. You kind of have to be aware of all audiences or to your target audience at least. So, important stuff and something that again we could definitely learn from. Speaking of, peppers, which you just talked about, though, you have very, poetic and descriptive descriptions of those. Tell us about that. Clearly, food plays a huge role. Who
Yeah, well, I like food,
doesn't?
so yeah, some people don't. Some people are like, yeah, it's just kind of fuel. Like, they don't really get into the whole sensual aspect of it, but
True.
I definitely do. And so to me, and I have the books in different sections. And first I went through Baja and then Central Mexico. And to me, Central Mexico was all about food. Like that, I made that sort of the theme because it's just incredible. Like, Oaxaca and Puebla are the sort of the two cities that are kind of like the heart of old Mexico, along with Mexico City.
Okay.
And they're in its competition. Like they both have different kinds of mole, this chocolate sauce that dish, and they compete with each other. And I think that keeps them both really sharp. Like they're always on their A game because they're competing about it. And there were so many different dishes. And one of the joys would be like finding that a gordita is actually a thing in Mexico and not like something Taco Bell just made up, you know?
Right, right.
Um, and like in Oaxaca, there's these things called tlayudas that are sort of like a flat pizza thing, and they have a bean and they base, and then this Oaxaca cheese, which is just incredible. It's Oaxaca cheese makes everything great. It's kind
Right.
of like string cheese, but a million times tastier and saltier, and it's just so good. Like I think our American string cheese is based on Oaxaca cheese. It's the, Disneyfied watered down version of Oaxaca cheese or something. But these tlayuda, I just stumbled upon this. I'm like, well, I'm not even that hungry, but I'm gonna have to eat one of these because it looks and smells so good. And it's cooking on this traditional comal, which is like kind of this disc that they put fire under. And I wondered why those haven't caught on in the States. And I'm like, maybe it's the name because it's Tlayuadas. And I'm like, maybe they need to come up with a different name for Americans because tlayuda is kind of hard to pronounce or something. But but yeah, and some people really like the food part. Like my friend's mom was kind of one of my first beta readers, and she just loved all the food stuff. And she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go buy some Oaxaca cheese, and I'm making these recipes." And then some people I could tell that it just wasn't, the food stuff wasn't as interesting to them. So it's yeah, you kind of have different audience segments, but I like travel shows. And I always like when they eat, and also like Tony Bourdain talks about that, like how do you describe the taste of something? You really can't, but you can kind of give ideas of how it made you feel, and in general, just the combination of things that's going on in your mouth at the time or something. But I try not to go too overboard just trying to describe taste because it's such a weird thing to describe.
It is, yeah, and some tastes might taste different to other people. If you're comparing a certain flavor to, the Indian sweets, for example, then to you that might not give the same impression as somebody who loves it, right? So it's hard to
Yeah.
find those words that resonate with everybody. So amazing there. Did you have a certain strategy for doing that, or it kind of just trial and error?
Yeah, just trial and error. I like I said, I did the comedic writing, so I felt pretty good about that. And I did and I've got about 250,000 posts on message boards just arguing about really dumb things like politics and poker and Kansas City Chiefs, and which is a kind of writing, and it's a kind of writing where you're dealing with people with a short attention span. You want to keep their attention, so you don't want these walls of text paragraphs. You mix it up with pictures, and that's kind of a lesson that I tried to take because it's a long book, but it has short chapters, and I try to break it up so it's not just pages of text. Like there's pictures or something. I really like when authors do stuff with different fonts or throw in different visual gags into the book. I
Right.
try to do that. But my biggest bugaboo was descriptive writing of like setting the scene because that's something I felt like I hadn't done since creative writing in college, basically. And just so that was the hardest muscle to work. But food was the easier, I think, because I just like food so much. It wasn't as it was easy to talk about.
Understood. Okay. Well, thank you for kind of, walking us through all that. I think these are all tips that even though you had a very unique experience can be transferred to any other type of book. If people need to think about these
Mhm.
types of things, descriptions and, how to present it to the right audience, that sort of thing. And this is a perfect way that you've done so. Um, so this book is, it's out there, it's been made a huge splash, but there's got to be something else on your radar. Have you been working on any other projects that the audience nest could be excited to hear more about?
Well, I'm hoping to go back and do South America. That's the name of my blog is Ushuaia or Bust, and Ushuaia is the southernmost city in the world in the bottom of Argentina. Unless Chile claims it's this city called Port Williams, but that's like a fort. So
Ah,
technically it's not a city or something. And it's not really that big. So most people say it's Ushuaia, and that's where the Pan American Highway ends.
right.
And so I've been in bust mode for 7 years now. And I was pretty close, I think, to going back on the road, and then COVID hit. I'm like, well, I'm not going anywhere
Uh,
now. And that ended up if I didn't have the book to write, I would have gone crazy. And now the book came out last June, and I'm starting to go a little crazy. Like I need something to do. So
Right, you
I'm
might need to go to
looking.
that shut up and write class again, huh?
Yeah, well, right now I don't have anything to write about. I need more material. Like I always kind of felt like I have a degree in physics and a minor in creative writing, and I always felt like I wanted to be a writer, but I knew I didn't have like a novel in me. Like it's just not the kind of writing I do. Same way, like I'm into photography. I like to take pictures of things that actually exist, and then I can put my artistic spin on them. But the idea of like painting a painting from scratch is just absolutely terrifying and beyond me. Kind of the same way with a book, like making up a plot from scratch would be too hard. But if something actually happened, then I can, embellish it, make it fun, make it interesting. And so, yeah, I need to go do South America and write a book about it. And the ideal, if it all goes well, would be to kind of do the whole world as much as I can in my
That'd be cool.
car and write a series of books. And maybe by the end, I have like this, group of diehard fans that are excited for the next book. I know I have at least 10 to 20, I guess, that for sure people that have reached out to me, like I call them my super fans, that I'm not related to and didn't know me before the book. And just having that is really cool. And okay, how do I reach more of these people? And they tend to be maybe like a half a generation older, um, but kind of either want to vicariously go on the trip or literally want to like go hang out on the next trip, which could happen. Who knows? So yeah, I want to get out there, do South America. And, one of the things you talked about was how would you approach it differently next time? And the interesting part is the first time I was really afraid of crime and researching things and cops asking for bribes, and none of that happened on the whole trip. One border guard at Nicaragua asked for a propina for kind of a little tip, and I was already paying this helper guy to run around and do all this stuff for me, and I just like, how can I pay two propinas? That doesn't make sense. And he pouted. He made like a really comical pout, which is not. And I was thinking when I was running through all the bribe scenarios before the trip in my head, I was not expecting pouting, and then he just stamped my form anyway and sent me on my way.
Mm,
But I'm not going to worry about that as much, or really at all. I mean, you still research and you want to know where the bad areas are, but now I'm just worried like, does as much exciting stuff happen to me this time? Or that's my biggest fear is that it just ends up being boring and nothing exciting happens. And I don't think that'll happen, but yeah. So my biggest fear has definitely changed, and also I realized it's so much cheaper. You'd think, oh, this is a trip of your lifetime. You got to save up for it. And it's actually,
it's not, yeah. Once you
yeah,
get there, yeah.
just existing in LA is probably I spent three times as much money
Mm,
just to live here and pay bills and have a car and insurance and go to the gym and all that stuff as I did on the trip of my lifetime, doing, like you can live, things may be different now because, inflation everywhere, but you could live really well on like $1,500 a month doing that trip. And there's people that spent less than that, always bought their own food and camped in their van. And I'm staying in cheap hostels wherever I can and eating a lot of street food. So I'm going to spend more money. But yeah, $2,000 a month, you can live really high on the hog, which was a big surprise to me. Like it never occurred to me that it would be that. That was kind of one of the big revelations when I came back. It's just how much more expensive it is to exist in a, you know, country like the United
our own
States.
country. Yeah, absolutely. I know exactly where you're coming from. I'm a big traveler myself, and it's almost like, anywhere else is so much more simple, I mean, think Asia. But yeah, I
Yeah.
appreciate you pointing that out because I think anybody who has the travel bug can learn from that. Don't let fear of that hide you back. It's doable. Just plan it and go.
Rolf Potts, that guy, the travel writer, he's one of his, so he has this book called Vagabonding, um,
Mm.
that's basically the whole theme of the book. And right in the beginning, he talks about in the movie Wall Street, Charlie Sheen says, I'm going to work for 10 years and then drive my motorcycle across China. And
Okay.
Rolf is like, you could do that now. You don't need to work on Wall Street for 10 years to save up enough money to ride your motorcycle. You can basically be broke and get over there and buy a motorcycle and work, whatever. So yeah, that was my little aside that I thought was funny.
Absolutely. That's pretty funny too.
Yep.
Yeah, so you mentioned that some super fans do reach out and connect. So, I mean, where's the best place people can connect and stay up to date with these potential new books? Where should we all head to?
The best place is my website. It's just my name, mattsavino.com. And from there, there's a big link to the book on Amazon. You can also find the book on like bookshop.org, which is supports local bookstores. So I like, putting that out there. And yeah, it's also got some of my photos on there, some links, and it will and my blog from my original blog from the trip, which will start getting updated again as soon as I start the new trip. And also I'm going to put a section for podcasts that I've been on too. I've been on, I think you're the fourth one I've been on now. So
Nice.
I need
Okay.
to go in there and make a little podcast section so I can, put everybody's link on there. I just, I don't like fighting with WordPress. I put it off till the last minute.
I understand. Yeah, it does get to be a little bit of a hassle. Well, great. We'll put the link to that in the description box of this podcast today, so everyone can go ahead and click on over and get in touch, get in the know. Do you have any pieces of advice for the authors out there today as they continue on with the rest of their day after listening tonight?
I guess just if you're thinking about writing something, just start. That way, at least you're like a couple of steps up the mountain and not staring up at it from the very bottom. Like we had an underground newspaper in high school, and we were talking about doing all these things, and it probably would have been just like all these other things we talked about. But this one friend of mine actually started writing an article, and I was sitting next to him in class. I'm like, oh, wait, you mean we're actually going to do this thing? Okay. And then I started writing an article, and then and otherwise, but if that wasn't for that was the lesson I took away from that is a lot of times if it's something new and scary and weird, just start. Don't think too much about it. That would be my advice for anybody who's thinking about writing something.
Yeah, just start. Don't let it hold you back.
Yeah,
The more you think about it, the more you delay. Well, is it ever going to happen? Same with your trip, right? The more you think about the trip, just go for it. Go down to South America, man.
yeah. I'm in that mode right now. I'm starting to think, okay, you got to do this at some point. It's just a matter of timing, and it's scary being an out of work computer programmer in your 50s is a little scary, but I know I still got to do it and let the chips fall where they may.
Understood. Well, hey, everybody, let's take it from him. He knows how to make life exciting and how to translate it into a book. And just if you're inspired, go do it. And also reach out, click on the links in the description box, get the book, and stay in the know. It's something we should all be looking out for. So, Matt, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It's been a real pleasure. You have some really fun experiences, a lot to share. I think people can really be excited for the rest of the book now.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, my pleasure too, for sure.
All right. Well, everybody, there you have it. Tons of writing tips learned. Great overview of the book as well. And it's been absolutely fascinating. So, again, you can find Land Without a Continent on Amazon. We got the links in the description box of this podcast today. And as you continue on with your own adventure, just remember that every expert was once a beginner who refused to give up. So, until next time, this is the Authors on Mission podcast, inspiring you to turn your expertise into your legacy. Keep writing, keep leading, and keep inspiring. We'll see you next time on the Authors on Mission podcast. That's a wrap on another episode of the Authority on Demand podcast. If today's conversation sparked something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with a founder or a leader who's ready to stop being the best kept secret in their industry. If you want to turn your expertise into inbound demand, head to authorityondemand.com to see how we help clients go from unknown to in demand. I'm Danielle Hutchinson, and I'll catch you on the next one. Now, go build some authority.